Okay, we are live. I'm here with Danny. Danny, how you doing?
Hey, doing all right, doing all right.
Thanks for booking the interview. How exactly did we meet? Did I comment on some channel on Telegram you're part of, or what happened there?
Yeah, I just got a message. I just wrote some stuff in one Telegram chat, and they're like, "Oh, you're edgy. Well, come on this
Oh, you're that
podcast."
guy. Okay, you're that guy.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Okay, cool. Yeah. Thanks for taking the bait there.
hmm I
So,
love it.
yeah, it's a cool community on Telegram. I'm just discovering it. I'm loving it. I'm a Gen Xer born in '70, but I've been welcomed with open arms by the Zoomers. Are you a Zoomer?
Yeah, I guess.
You guess you're not sure.
Yeah, I'm in mid 20s, so.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about yourself. This is what I like to do on my show. I like to talk about the guest, who you are, what you believe, why you believe what you believe, what kind of a faith journey have you been on, and you're a young man, so it's probably a work in progress. But just tell me and my small coterie of listeners what you're all about, please.
I actually have a little bit of an interesting spiritual past. I identify and go to an Orthodox church because that most aligns with my views and is best for building communal and spiritual purposes.
Greek Orthodox
Uh,
or what kind of Orthodox?
well, I mean, it's part of the
OCA?
Antiochian church.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but there are some things that I believe that would be told as heresy, and I might get excommunicated. Like the main one I would say is like reincarnation, which I
Oh,
believe in that. Even though the majority of modern day Christians don't believe in that. But from my research and what I've read in the Bible, uh, I could only find really one passage from Hebrews, whose author is unknown, talking about saying, "And I'm sure as we died, just one death," and that's the evidence is scant of the Bible supporting only one death. And when we go to heaven, is it immediately after we die? It's not really defined.
okay. You think there are a finite number of lifetimes, but more than one. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, there's more than one. I think not every when people die, not everyone, you either get reincarnated or you go to heaven or you go to hell. But I would say the majority of people get reincarnated. You have to be like really evil or like really good in the logos to ascend, and otherwise it's just like it makes far more sense energetically speaking that the energy of us is recycled. And but if we raise our energy and our vibrational levels high enough, that's when we become attuned with God. And that's what Jesus Christ was. He was in perfect attunement with the Father. And so basically living like a Christ-like path puts you on that spiritual attunement with the Father.
Mm.
And what sin is moving away from that spiritual attunement. And negative energy does that a lot, as well as what is defined as sin in the Bible.
Yeah. So I don't have a big problem with your particular rendition of reincarnation. Why? Because you have a permanent hell. That's all important to me. If we're going to have morality, if we're going to make choices in this life, and as you would propose in the other lives that we live, those choices have to have consequences, lasting consequences. So most of the religions of the East, sadly, they remove all the consequences. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take you to get back to the one reality, that one mind of God. And to me, that's a total cop out, and there is absolutely no basis for morality. If I want to take the dark, interesting route to heaven, according to the Eastern philosophies and worldviews and religions, which say that there's only the mind of God and separation is illusion. If I want to take the interesting long route to heaven, then you, as my brother, cannot chastise me. You cannot say, no, David, you have to go, you have to improve your virtue, you have to be resist temptation and these sorts of things. But with your point of view, with your reincarnation, you're in a good position to tell me, David, don't sin, don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat, and all these sorts of things, right?
Correct. And I'm I'm not sure what you're referring to in terms of like the Buddhist or the Hindu ways of like the dismissal of, I guess, karmic energy. But I think in general, like the karmic energy and what is sin and what is virtue is like it's all interconnected. And so like there's certain energetic acts that raise your vibrational level a lot more, which is like love is like the number one. And for lowering it, it's emotions like fear, anxiety, shame, stuff like that. And so when we're in these states, also other entities can sense that too. And this is where demons come up a little bit, is like they want people in a negative state because they feed off of that energy from the lower realm. So in a way, there is a lot of that demonic influence on people, or and people aren't even aware of it. But things like that are very true, and I've had experiences that have happened like that, and that brought me to Christianity.
Cool. Can you talk a little bit in depth about your conversion experience? And while you're at it, talk a little bit about your ethnic background, if you're comfortable sharing it. Where'd your parents come from, and what kind of background did they have religiously, if you don't mind?
So I mean, I'm just an Amerimut. So, but I'm 100% European. I'm quarter Sicilian. I'm like half German, French, and then a quarter Norwegian. And most of my background is either Protestant or Catholic.
Oh, okay.
Um, but
No Orthodox.
no, I came to Orthodox of my own volition. In fact, um, I and people will call me delusional and whatnot, but I actually found orthodoxy on LSD. Um, yeah,
Wow.
I
What a trip. Man, I wish that happened to everyone that took LSD. That would be amazing. I'd be handing it out on the street corners.
yeah. It was the best experience of my life because yeah, I found orthodoxy, and it's crazy because when I mean, I talked to an angel, and it's like, a lot of people say that's delusional, and it's like it's not real, but I like talked to like a guardian angel, and I didn't really see him. It was just kind of like a glowing figure, and it kind of reminded me of like my brother in like a much healthier state, like a natural state. And what he told me was, he told me to talk to this Orthodox Christian who I've never met, but I knew his name. He was an acquaintance of an acquaintance. And basically, this guy was like, you need to talk to this guy, and he'll tell you everything you need to know to basically succeed and be happy in life. And I went and found him. He was in a city about 4 hours away, and we just talked and talked and talked. And he was like a mega autist. He was like he was a Orthodox Christian from the Middle East, actually. And they take their shit very seriously compared to like, in my opinion, like Catholics and Protestants.
Wow. Sounds very, very intense. So are you on fire for the faith then?
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, is it your top priority, pleasing God and following the steps of Jesus Christ and going to heaven and all that?
Yeah, it's definitely up there. And I pray. I have my icons, but I keep it private
Okay.
for the most part.
Yeah.
When I have like certain personas, like how I am at church is different, how I am alone, and also how I am with like normal people who are very faithless or atheistic. The general materialist degeneracy that goes about. So, but the main thing when I'm dealing with like the public like that is like I'm just trying to stress as much as possible that it's important to believe in something like spiritual that is greater than because everybody like my age just thinks we're just a bunch of chemicals, like we're just matter, and there's no divine spark in us. And I try to make it my points that to emphasize we have a divine spark. We can do amazing things, and things like that.
What about Darwinian evolution and post-Darwinian and neo-Darwinian evolution? Are you a fan? Are you a young Earth creationist, or what's the story?
No, it's I keep getting into arguments with Christians about evolution because I am a big proponent of Darwin. I actually studied biology very intensely in university, and I read Charles Darwin's Origin of Species. So, I mean, I can explain it pretty well, but most Christians that are stuck in the Hollow Earth mindset, like they will look for anything to support um, their uh, their the way they think because number one, it all comes down to Genesis when God created the earth in 7 days, and so if you take that literally, it's like 7 days to create the whole world, and then the Septuagint says um, early Earth says it's about 5,000. But for my research and my calculations, I think Noah's flood happened in about 9,000 BC, right when the shift from the end of the Ice Age and like flooding with the glaciers and whatnot. So, and based on tectonic plate movements, fossils. I studied paleontology as well. And it's just like the grasping for straws, oh, the fossils are, put there by Satan to deceive us, or, it's like the dating isn't accurate and stuff like that. It's reaching for straws. So.
Interesting, very interesting. I've got so many things I want to ask you. Before I start bombarding you with random questions, I just want to give you the floor and sort of ask you to talk about the things you're most excited about in terms of your reading, your studies. It seems like you're someone who thinks deeply and who looks into things and forms his own opinions and isn't too concerned about swimming upstream, maybe. What are some of the ideas you've discovered, you're excited about? What are some of the other interesting anomalies? Because you're obviously somewhat unorthodox in your orthodoxy. You mentioned that yourself in your email to me, I think. But just talk a little bit, flesh out your peculiar worldview for us before I start with the freestyle questions, please.
Um, well, I think I gave a pretty general good synopsis.
Okay.
The only thing that I would add is a lot of things that mainstream Christians kind of shy away from is like number one, I like to read like all sorts of literature like on like Eastern philosophies, even though I don't believe in all of them. Like, of course, sacrifices, I don't approve of that. But like I'm reading the Bhagavad Gita right now,
Okay.
and it's a very impressive book,
Is
and I
that the
think
Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad
yes,
Gita? Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
and it's a very impressive book, and it aligns a lot with number one, reincarnation and the karmic energy of the world, and of action and inaction. Um, Also, the polarity. Everything is very polar in the world. There's always like pretty much direct opposites, light, dark, up, down, 1, 0, 1, in that regard. And I actually have done ayahuasca, and on ayahuasca, I saw the world that was divided up like that, and especially like male or man and woman. That
Mm,
was a big one too.
wow. Uh, we're going to stick to little Eastern topics here. I'm a big believer in karma, cause and effect, and I haven't met many Catholics who really have appreciated karma to the extent that I do, just because I see it in very simplistic terms, like you reap what you sow, and I think it's a very Christian notion. So you can talk about that, and I want you to talk a little bit about monism versus monotheism, where there's just that. I alluded to this earlier, where there's just the one mind of God, everything else is illusion. I am sympathetic to monism. I'm sympathetic to the East because I think that ultimately, mystically, there really is only God, and I don't exist. I'm just a mere creature. I'm finite and this sort of thing. And by the grace of God, I'm given the opportunity to, by the process of theosis, to become God or participate in the life of the Trinity. I'll never be God, but it's like that's what heaven is entering into the life of the Trinity. This is my Catholic perspective. And in the East, you emphasize theosis even more than your typical Catholic would in the pews, at least. I don't know about theologians today. But talk a little bit about karma, not too much, but just a little bit, and then monism versus monotheism.
So I just want to correct you in saying that we are not finite. Our souls, they will always have energy, basically. So they will always be around. Just like what form is that energy taking into, and how we define that. It's hard to do but going to karma, the way I've come to understand the world is it's all about energy. Everything is literally about energy, vibrations, and that's why Nikola Tesla was an absolute genius. He figured out the code basically. And so all karma is a very simple idea. It's basically like the energy you give out, you get, and it's cause and effect. Very simple. Yeah. And so, so like
would it help Christians to embrace that idea more, just to take away some of the wrath of God, because God gives us free will. He respects our free will. And if we make choices that are not in line with God's will, then we run into brick walls and we get bumps and bruises and we get burned. Like you play with fire, you get burned. This is just karma. There's no malice from God. So I think the cold Eastern cause and effect idea of karma is helpful in mitigating this sort of demonization of God, where we think he's a big bully in the sky, especially for the atheist. Do you agree with me on that karma could be helpful for that?
Yes, I do think karma as a term should be implemented into Christianity. I think it's just, anti-intellectualism, stuff like, if it's not listed in the Bible, it's not real, basically. It's not as important. But the important point, like atheists and with the material realm, is like talking about the main things you have to establish is that there's good and evil, and we have free will. That is the most important thing to establish, because if they can't agree on that, you're not going to get any progress. And so free will in the Garden of Eden is probably the most important thing about the history of humanity, because everything goes back to the Garden of Eden. And in my opinion, that's why there was a creator in the Garden of Eden. He gave us that divine spark because number one, he didn't want to be alone, or the creator didn't want to be alone, and he wanted something to share in the beauty of the universe. But he wanted it to be for free and not to have limitations. And so when basically why was the tree there? Who knows? Why was the fruit there? Who knows? Maybe it was a condition of the world, when he created it, is for the energy reasons. But and then the negative, the snake tempted the Eve, and then it's all history since then. Now we're just in the fallen state, and but what Jesus Christ is what Adam was originally before the fall. So.
Have you seen the icon, the Eastern Orthodox icon of Christ with Adam? They're like twins.
No, I don't believe I have.
They look exactly identical. So I don't think that's a coincidence, because these icons in the East are taken as a mystical vision of heaven, right? My friend Kieran says, ask him if he's read Christ the Eternal Tao. Christ the Eternal Tao. Apparently it's a book you might want to read.
Tao? How do you spell the Tao?
T-A-O, Tao.
Oh, like Taoism?
Yeah.
No, that does sound interesting, though. I would like to read it. I haven't read too much. I'm getting back into my spiritual readings and stuff, because I had to finish a bunch of Orthodox books. I read one on Saint Anthony.
Which Saint Anthony of the desert?
Of Egypt, yeah, the Saint Anthony the Great,
founder of whatever it's called, whatever, when you go away in hermitage or whatever.
Yeah, he was a monk.
Monk,
yeah,
the first monk sort of thing.
Well, he was one of the greatest monks. I mean, I wouldn't say the first one, but he was like the main thing about why he like became a monk was he heard the line, if from Jesus in the gospel saying, if you want to follow me, sell all your possessions and go and give everything away. And like as soon as he heard it, he like did it. And it's like it's interesting because that Bible or that gospel quote caused me a little trouble because I'm like, why doesn't every Christian, go and just give their stuff away and like, just live this life? And I asked my priest about that, and his response was basically like the path for all of us is different. But I think the more important thing about that is like the attachments and to reduce attachments. And that's another Eastern thought that's also prevalent in Christianity is like attachment isn't good to this realm.
Yeah. You have
because
you have to hate your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, and your very self. Otherwise, you're not worthy to be Christ's disciple.
Well, I wouldn't say you hate them, you love them.
Well, that's what Jesus said, right?
What's the quote on or the passage?
Unless you hate your mother and your sister and your brother and your very self, you're not worthy to be my disciple. So that's what Christ said. Now it's a relative hatred, right? It's a hatred relative to the love, the burning love we need to have for God, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. So it's a tricky.
I think I know the passage you're saying, but it might have been translated differently.
Yeah, it's open to interpretation. My friend Kieran says he's Orthodox, also, by the way, a convert from different things. But he says Hiero monk Damascene is the author of the book The Eternal Tao. He's a disciple of Father Seraphim Rose, who's a very famous Orthodox.
Oh, I know him.
Yeah.
The Eternal Tao. Okay.
You could check it out. Christ is the Eternal Tao or something like that. So I wanted to ask you, so just generally speaking about Taoism, what do you think of it? Because you mentioned that polarity, the male, female, black, white, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, yin and yang.
Yeah, do you like that? It resonates with you a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I was referred in the Bhagavad Gita, and that, I recently did the ayahuasca. I did it 5 times, and I was having discussions with like Christians about it, and it's like, you're just seeing illusions again. But at the same time, I think like the way the material realm is made up in like the natural logos and the natural order of the world, it has certain traits. And it is like hackable, it's like once you figure it out, it's like you can kind of, you're still bound by like karmic law and karmic energy, but it's like once you understand it, it's like nothing can stop you basically. But yeah, so Taoism, I really need to do more research on. I know there's a lot of study into like immortality and like extending the life as long as possible, and like sexual control techniques and stuff like that. But yeah, I really need to do more research on it. But yeah, I absolutely do believe in like poles and polar opposites, and like they balance each other out in kind of like a wavy center or wavy way. It's like, waves come in and then they go out, and like, so in a way, another thing I'd like to talk about is like astrology, or like the way the constellations are up there. Yeah. It actually matters in a way. And like there is astrology in the Bible. It's like, divination is kind of like discouraged extremely. And it kind of, it should be to a decent extent because, in the wrong hands, it can be bad. But, when the 3 wise men found Jesus, they followed the sign from the stars. And in Revelation, basically, most of it was about the stars and the cosmic phenomena. So with those things, I don't know where I was going.
Well, we should not underestimate the value of the heavens, because they're called the heavens for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. And there are different levels of heaven. Is chastity a virtue in your worldview?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, are you striving for chastity? Because you mentioned the sexual teachings of the East, and they're definitely not pushing chastity.
Well, it's so that what I was referring to with that was actually, I mean, number one, in the marriage room, like it's allowed, it's sanctified. Sex isn't a bad thing. It's a bad thing when it's not done in the proper setting. Yeah. Number two, the thing I was referring to was this technique where men like can have an orgasm without releasing semen, and that is the technique that was developed under Taoism, and it preserves your spiritual energy, but at the same time, you have an orgasm. I don't think I think men should conserve their sexual energy intensely, and so I think that's a very it's accomplishable to do that kind of thing. It's very powerful and useful.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was finished.
Have you read the Philokalia, or however you pronounce it?
The Philokalia. How do you spell that?
Philo, like philosophy, philo, friend of, or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Kalia is the good or the beautiful. Kalia, Kalia. Nothing to do with Kali, the dark demon goddess.
Oh yeah.
Kalia. So it's a collection of the Desert Fathers from the East, the Orthodox writings.
Okay.
And it's very powerful. I highly recommend it to you and to anyone else. It took me about 11 months to read it, just because it's a big book, it's a big collection of writings, and it's heavy. It's simple, the message is simple, but it's just drilling home a few very, very, very important points about self-control, primarily to do with food, and controlling food is the way to control lust. And I'm very gluttonous with food, and I have a lot of lusty images that haunt me, because before my conversion, obviously, I was just a godless atheist. I just indulged in whatever image was pleasing to the eyes, and so those images kick around in your head, right? So controlling food is a good way to control the lust and all that sort of thing. It's very, very powerful. There's more to it than that, but that's what my main takeaway was: self-control, self-mastery, and Christ as priest, prophet, and king. That kingly aspect is the self-control.
I'm absolutely a huge fan of or proponent of fasting. I think it's everybody should do it, and it has biological benefits as well as spiritual benefits. But what you're referring to is talking about the senses, and like asceticism is these senses and the temptations that go through your head, and basically you're fighting your mind, or these distractions that are coming in, and you are using your self-control to basically you have to deal with that. But I think it's very important not to associate like negativity with these thoughts, or what goes through your head, because that makes those thoughts stronger.
Okay.
And also so basically you're going to have a lot of these thoughts going in your head that you might not want to think, but you need to just recognize them and then let them pass over, and that is the sign of self-control. And it can be a lot hard, really, really hard for a lot of people, but making sure you do that is very important. And it goes to meditation as well. Meditation is all about that. If you try and meditate, you're going to have all these thoughts coming in your head trying to distract you while you're just trying to focus on your breath. So yeah.
My friend Kieran sort of reflected the same sort of idea that I had when you were talking about orgasms without ejaculation, and it's like that's not chastity, no matter how you slice and dice it. It's like the opposite of chastity, when you're seeking that pleasure of the orgasm without being open to life and without doing what the natural act is intended to do, right? You're supposed to give completely of yourself to your spouse, and it's a reciprocal giving, self-giving. There's no holding back of the seed, right? So it's not a very Catholic idea. I don't think it's a very Orthodox. According to my Orthodox friend here, Kieran, he says it's not Orthodox, and you should talk to your priest about it.
Okay. Well, just to readdress that, I want to say that like I say, I'm going to say whatever happens in the bedroom happens in the bedroom. And I think sex is also more than just the reproduction. It's the bonding. It's the emotional energies of a man and a woman, and the acts they do. The reason I brought it up was because it was an example of self-control, and basically like it's a state. I mean, what is an orgasm? It's a state of the highest one of the highest energies in your body, and so it can be abused really, really easily. But I was just using it as an example of what you can do. And so, saying it's not orthodox. If you're using it just, doing it for pleasure, for pleasure's sake to get the stimulus, it's like, yes. But the thing is, you're doing it with another person. And sometimes you want to have that bond without reproducing, without, losing your sexual energy. So that's what I'm talking about.
I don't need to press the issue here. So Kieran says, what I hear him say about the thoughts is all something addressed by the fathers. The logismis or logismos is what this is called. They can be fought or ignored. So I think he's talking about when you're talking about fighting off distractions. I think that's what he's talking about. But I wanted to ask you, are you, this is very personal, but are you married? Are you looking to get married? What's your situation? Do you have sex outside of marriage? Have you had it? Do you regret it? What's your story? As much as you're comfortable talking about.
Yeah, basically, the women where I'm at, they kind of disgust me, and how they're just disgusting. Like, some of them I work with, and they're good looking women, and if they had a proper male figure that was responsible with them, they wouldn't be so fucked up. But there's just like all they talk about is like tattoos, sex toys, just like dirty jokes and stuff like that. And
no class.
It's like, exactly. And it's just low, like none of them read, a lot of low vibrational energy, a lot of like, lustful things, going out and drinking all the time. And so, where I'm at right now is not a good place to date or to find a partner, especially just in America. When I was traveling abroad, in countries that were a little more traditional and not as corrupted by the globo homo, so to speak, they were more eligible for being a companion or a wife partner. But in general, I'm pretty chaste. I try not to, masturbate at all. And I also don't like having sex that much. So I just prefer, that's what I was saying, is like, I like to convert my sexual energy into something else,
Sublimate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you met the right woman, say at an Orthodox church or whatever, you'd be open to getting married and having family, or what?
Yeah.
Let's hope and pray that happens. I mean, there are other paths in life. You don't have to do that, but it's one path. It's an exciting path, fraught with danger and problems, as St. Paul says. But if you are struggling with the sex thing, which most men are, then marriage seems like a good option. St. Paul says better to marry than to burn, right? So. Yeah.
But I'm not gonna be anxious about it.
Of course.
Number one, time is on the men's side. And so I'm just it's just simple biological fact. And number two, I'm just the prime of a man's life, I think, is in his late 20s and early 30s.
Yeah.
And my goal is just like to get as big as possible so that like people and women can't ignore me. Like, they can't just walk by. It's like, I'm so big that they have to look over at me.
Are you ripped like the guy in the image there?
Oh, I'm not that ripped. No, not that toned. But I have a very, very healthy body. I try to do yoga, and after yoga, like an hour of yoga, I do like my workout for an hour. So
have you turned down women that were subtly or not subtly asking for sexual favors?
Yes.
You've said no?
Yes.
Even though she was attractive, or only the ugly ones?
Only the ugly one. Well, actually, so I made out with a few, but the thing is like, I didn't want to go any further other than making out. So, that's what I'd say to that.
Is it a burden? Are you a good-looking guy?
I don't want to.
Average?
I don't even.
You don't want to even go there?
It's why Why does it matter?
Well,
Why does
because
it
it's
matter?
like
And
if you are, then it's going to be more temptation because women are going to be throwing themselves at
yeah,
you. If you're big,
yeah,
ripped, and
I would
handsome.
I would say, it depends where I'm at, how attractive I am. Like just certain places I'm like really good looking, and certain places I get nothing. Which in America I get nothing. So
I see. Okay, okay. What about? I hate politics. I hate it, but I want to talk a little bit about the right wing because I've been exploring this whole Telegram thing and the Groypers, and I'm a super fan of Nick Fuentes, just because not because of his politics, but just because I think he's entertaining.
yeah, he's funny.
Um, and he's charming and all that sort of thing. I don't know what he really believes. I invited him on my podcast, but he's too big and famous and busy.
Yeah.
But just talk about the alt right and the sort of dada culture where there's like shit posting and just there's a lot of humor, there's a lot of youth, there's a lot of male energy, not a lot of female energy in that scene. Is the alt right still a thing, or has it been totally like morphed into something else? And Gamergate and Trump and all that. Just talk about the American culture with the right. What's happening with what's happening today? I see a lot of religion in the young people in the right. So just talk about that from your perspective, if you could. If you could.
It's simply a reaction to the acceleration of the degeneracy that's been pushed after the start of the social media age in 2007, and basically how they accelerated from getting gay marriage to trans people like molesting kids now. So it's just like that acceleration happens so fast. You're going to have a reactionary movement, and the thing is, where the quote that alt-right thing, I think the main thing that's everybody that's part of that group is they're anti-Zionist. They don't like Israel, and for good reason, because Israel is one of the most evil countries in the world, and how the Protestants just bootlick Israel every time they can get, and the Republicans in Congress. So I think that's the main thing. Is all about Israel basically, and it's like being against centralization of like the Federal Reserve, central banks, and like New World Order stuff. And of course, this would only be a guy's interest thing. Like girls don't perceive that at all. They don't even care. Why would they care? A girl's evolutionary purpose is just to survive, and like they basically are guaranteed to reproduce. Whereas guys have to work within the political system, and working within the political system, number one, is more interesting to them, and number two, guarantees their future, and like they look ahead way farther into the future than most women do, I would say.
Yeah. So the whole Jewish topic, I don't know why it's such a hot button topic, and I do enjoy Telegram because of the freedom people have there to bash Judaism, like I mean, or the Jews who are trying to do nefarious things or whatever. Like I mean, I think it's a bit weird when we can't like talk about everything, including the Holocaust or whatever. I've seen some pretty shocking stuff on Telegram, people with their ideas about Hitler and the Holocaust and these sorts of things. And I think in an open society that's mature and rational, we can discuss anything, like absolutely anything, and we don't need to get our panties in a bunch and get all uptight and throw people in prison for thought crimes. So I'm not committed to any political ideology or whatever. I think I think Hitler gets more mischaracterized, and he gets a bad rap more than he deserves. That's what I think. I don't know the whole story. I don't claim to know both sides of that complicated part of history. But I mean, I have a certain fondness for him, and I hope he goes to heaven. I think he was probably evil and did some bad things, whatever, but I don't know the story. And also, it depends who writes the history books, right?
Yeah.
But like Nick Fuentes says, it's like it's like the reason to oppose Judaism is because it's not Christianity. Like it's like they promised the Messiah came, and then they don't appreciate God incarnate as the Messiah. It's just a bit weird. So, I mean, I do have a beef with any non-Christian religion because like it's all about monotheism. It's all about that promised Messiah. So I think it's our God-given right to question everything, and as long as we're respectful and we're not hurting people. So I do appreciate that about the right, that they're allowing free speech, even if it's like what seems like really harsh trash talking, which I have seen on Telegram, but I never know how seriously to take all of that stuff. Maybe you know more than I do.
Yeah, most people just trash talk. It's okay. So like not just on Telegram, but on like 4chan and stuff like that. That trash talk is to filter people. It's to filter basically, people who are easily triggered and
Snowflakes,
because
like.
yeah, exactly. And they're retarded anyway. So why would you even want them as part of the discussion? They're not going to be rational and they're not going to change their point of view. So that's what I kind of come to understand with that. Going back to Judaism, I have to say that number one, the Talmud is one of their holy books, and it talks about basically, molesting 3-year-old girls is allowed if they're not Jewish, and like talking about some depraved stuff in there. And so once the second temple got destroyed and the Jews are scattered, there was basically only the rabbinical Judaist sect, and then they went. They also don't have the same bloodline as the ancient Jews that Christ was a part of. Basically, Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews are part of different ethnic groups. So basically, the Ashkenazi were for part of the Khazarian horde in Ukraine, and basically then like they just migrated into Western Europe to become the banking clans. So not to mention the rabbis did, kill Christ. The blood is on their hands, and that's one of the,
Well, some of them converted, right? Nicodemus.
Well,
And
yeah, but like, that group was the decider, not the Romans. The Romans didn't kill him. Pontius Pilate washed his hands clean. So that crime is on those rabbis' hands. And then number 3, like Zionist, the state of Israel. Here's the thing: America has no basis anymore. We changed after the end of World War II. We changed into the myth of the founding of America is now the Holocaust. Okay, the Holocaust is the crucial focal point of everything that politics is today, because number one, it's like a sacred cow. You cannot touch it. You cannot talk about it whatsoever. And in any free speech society, only things of the highest religious statue should be like that. And so the fact that people are taking this with such religious vigor is because there was massive propaganda campaign. In fact, the propaganda about the Holocaust really accelerated in the 1970s. I mean, in the 50s and 60s, most people didn't know, or like the numbers were the real numbers, which were around 400 or 500,000, mostly due to disease and when the supply chains were destroyed, not actual death camps, but like the labor camps had those conditions going on. And so what they did was they created a massive propaganda campaign because they had control of the banks, they have control of the Hollywoods, and they're all of origins, and they all have connections with each other. And what else? Like the Rothschilds, for example, going back to the banks, they were Jewish as well. And but the thing is like, at the same time, you have to acknowledge that. You have to acknowledge that, in my opinion, to actually get anywhere, because they want to make it illegal to criticize. They want to make it so that they are a special class, higher above everyone else. And as Voltaire said, to know who rules over you, think about who you cannot criticize. So what they're doing now is basically, they realize how much of a threat Germanic people are, or the more primitive term that Americans use is white people. They realize that is the only group that's really a threat to their centralized New World Order plan. So, but the thing is, it's that, not all the low-level Jews are a part of this, just like low-level Masons don't know how satanic their organization is either.
Yeah.
So it's important, to treat them like humans, like anybody else. You can't dehumanize them, just as you hope not to be dehumanized, because, going back to karma. But at the same time, a large amount of evil happens in a very small percent of the population, and it needs to be addressed. Otherwise, you're just going to see the constant expansion of evil like a cancer in your society, and then you're going to be like, oh, what do we do? And that's what Republicans are like, oh, we're so stupid, we don't know what it is. So yeah.
Yeah, I've never understood. I struggle with this whole, the accusations that fly out so readily now from the left. You're a misogynist, you're a racist, you're anti-Semite. I don't know what the other ones are. Those are the main ones. But, focusing on racism, I don't quite understand what the fuss is about. Like, I really don't think anyone cares about skin color. I think it's just absurd. No one really cares. You might have your preference. Like, I mean, I'm sexually attracted to light-skinned women, like white women, but I mean, it's probably because I'm white. I don't know, but it's just a sexual preference. Whatever. I married a white woman, whatever. But who cares? Like, who cares? Like, I mean, does anyone care about race? And is race a real thing, or are we all humans evolved from, not evolved from, but descended from Adam and Eve? Like, that's what I believe. We're one race, the human race. Now, you might have a culture that annoys me because you talk loudly and your food stinks, so I don't want you living next to me or something like that, right? Or you do a lot of bouncy dancing in your apartment next to mine, and I don't like that. Yeah, that's a cultural sort of preference. I don't like that. But I don't get it. Like, I mean, I just don't understand what's the point of leveling the accusation of racism, and I don't understand why or how any individual could be racist and what that could mean. So it's a big thing on the right, and a lot of the people on the alt-right seem to be embracing it either sarcastically or for real. Can you just talk about it? Try to explain it to me. What is racism? What's going on? And why is it a big deal? And is it a big deal at all?
Yes, it is a big deal. And those Christians that say, oh, it's not a big deal, I pretend not to see it, are delusional. Okay. Your genetics matters, period, end of story. Okay. It determines a lot about you. It's 50% genetics and 50% how you're raised. And, there's countless studies that talk about this, but the main thing is 13% of the population is part of one race, and they commit over 50% of all violent crimes. Just like pit bulls commit 75% of all violent attacks, that is genetic. That's not how they're raised.
But is it because they're being systemically disadvantaged? I've heard that.
That's the leftist propaganda to provide the rationale about bad behavior from the African population. It's an excuse, and basically, it's just, it can be easily destroyed by the fact that there's countless other populations in the world that have suffered evils of slavery, evils of suffering of that caliber, but they came back and rebuilt. And they came back within like 50 years. So the fact that slavery ended 100 or 170 years ago, and basically there's so many advantages that are given to blacks in a society. They can get into colleges easier than anyone else with way lower grades. They can get their guaranteed positions at all these companies, and it's like it's not based on meritocracy.
Which is that called? What's that called? Where they put
affirmative action.
Yeah, they put women in. They put visible minorities in. They do that a lot in Canada. That's where I'm in Canada. They do that a lot. I'm opposed to it on principle because, like you said, it's not based on anything of value. Because I don't care what color your skin is. I mean, you're probably going to argue to me that I should care what color someone's skin is, but I don't.
It's not just the color. That's the obvious bait. You have the most important thing, in my opinion, is the cranial structure and the shape of a human head. I'm not even bullshitting you. Like, you can tell a lot. I mean, I would say you are like a mix of like Caucasian and like Middle Eastern, maybe a little Spanish or Mediterranean.
I did my DNA a couple of times, and I got Irish, Scottish, English, Welsh, Scandinavian, a bit of German, and a bit of
Huh.
Greek, a bit of Greek.
So then you might be a little Celtic, or the original Britons. That was where it reminds me of. But going back to that, I think I think it's very important. And
What does a skull shape do? Is this like shaping the thinking, or what?
well, it's that's just an example, because you were constantly referring to skin color, which is like, it's just the melanin content, which is obviously not that important. But like what race is like also everything else. It's like, it's the skull structure, it's your neuron capacity, it's like the development of your prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex in African people is actually lower than in Caucasian and Asians. And the prefrontal cortex controls impulsivity, long-term planning, and it's the last to develop in a fully developed brain. So because of that, you see phenomena like in the documentary Empire of Dust, when the Chinese went into Africa, the day they paid the African workers, they immediately spent that money, went drinking and spent it all, and then came begging for more. And so that is the problem with Africa, is all of these white messiahs go there, like, but they're wanting to fulfill their pathological empathy needs. They don't actually want to help the people. They want to feel good about themselves, because the way to actually help a person, as going back to the Bible, is give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. But the thing is, it's harder for them to learn that stuff in Africa. They didn't even invent a boat before Europeans came in. I'm not even shitting you. So,
but one thing I want to say before you go any further, when a family that doesn't fear God finds out that the wife is pregnant again, and this time the doctors and the experts say the child is going to have Down syndrome and a couple other problems, and they decide not to abort it for whatever reason, maybe a conversion to religion or something, and then they're very, very happy they didn't kill this defective baby, because this baby brought a lot of joy, innocence. There's more to life than getting a PhD, having a big brain and being really smart and all that sort of thing. Like, there's God created humans not to be geniuses. He created us to love him, to know him, to love him, and to serve him. And when you have a special child like that, you see the love of God. No, so this whole argument that black people are stupid or something, I mean, that might be true. I don't know, but it's kind of irrelevant from a Christian perspective. Like, God loves that child, and Christ died for that retarded child, right?
I mean, yeah.
What do you
I
want?
guess
Productivity? You want like high efficient society? You want smart people like that are
number one. I want a relatively stable society. I mean, I don't think, like, I try not to control everything anymore. I don't really try to care about that stuff anymore. But the thing is, if you walk into the south side of Chicago, okay, and then you come back to me, because and the other thing is, I as a man only have so much energy to dedicate to the world. So does everybody else. And the thing is, you are in a lower state of energy if you cannot comprehend and do this stuff. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not associating it with bad, but I'm saying you have to acknowledge it, because otherwise you're acting out of naiveness, and you could get killed, you could get robbed if you go into these high crime areas that are populated by certain groups of people. And the reason they're there is to there was the original slaves that came over, but as what's going on with Europe and Canada and America, they're putting more of these people that are dependent and want to be dependent on the government, and that will have no qualms about killing the native population when it comes to shove. Okay. So that's the main thing. And then once the natives are killed, they move on. That's the classic example of communism. And so it's the communism today is done with race instead of class. Okay, so they are not having the poor fight the proletariat fight the bourgeoisie. They're having the blacks try and destroy the whites. While the rich bankers of the Jewish class have their safety elsewhere. And so that's why the escalation of all this stuff is happening. I think there's that, I have some black friends. I know it's funny to say that, but basically there's a lot of good ones out there. But the thing is, we're also talking about a law of averages. Okay. And you need to take that into account, and to not is irresponsible to the safety of yourself and your family. But like I said, you still follow the general trajectory of you do treat these people with respect and dignity. And when they, you just did analyze how likely, it is that things could get bad. If you're in the fucking ghetto with people giving you weird fucking stares and cars without tires, you don't have the naive, I'm okay.
I don't see color. So what about, I find it transparent and obvious, all the virtue signaling of all these middle-class white women who are fighting so desperately to raise the dignity of these poor minority classes. Oh, no, we have to fight for them. It's who are you? Why are you assuming a position of a superiority right away to sort of stoop so low condescendingly to give a break? Let's give a break to the black guy. Let's give a break to the whatever minority. It's that is condescending right off the get-go. It's always a bunch of highly educated, quote unquote educated. This is another reason why I don't think intelligence is the most important thing in the eyes of Christ. A lot of educated people, white people, annoying educated white people, acting like they're the spokesperson for the visible minorities of the world. Who hired you to be the spokesperson and to condescend and to bend so low and to be so gracious? Oh, look at me. I'm going to do this. All this virtue signaling.
That's exactly right. And I'm glad you're smart enough to see that. I make that argument all the time. It's actually a real form of racism. And I think actually
it's real racism.
It's funny because white women, especially the liberal white women, are actually some of the most racist people there are.
Obviously.
Going back to the white messiah complex, it is it is literally the philosophy of you are too stupid to figure out what is good and you need help. You need a big helping hand from me, because I'm so special. They make it the center of attention, which is women's speciality. The other thing is going back to a biological point, since Western women aren't having kids anymore, they still have the biological imperative to have a nurturing thing. So they either replace that with a couple immigrants they get from a foreign country, or dogs or cats, or they substitute it with something else because they're tricking your body with birth control and other stuff. So that's basically when they should be having kids and dedicating their energy and defense and protection to them, they're doing it to something else, which is pathologically destructive and what I would call mentally ill.
Yeah. Well, I think it's painfully obvious what's happening. They're not fooling me. They're not fooling you. But they seem to be fooling a lot of the mainstream people with the mainstream media. But what about the fact, tell me if you agree with this statistic, but I read that somewhere between every 5 and 10 seconds, a child dies of hunger. Isn't that a much bigger crisis than COVID and monkeypox? Do you agree with the statistics? And don't you think it's kind of important that we can give the dignity to these children in these families so that they can actually have some food and water and shelter? Isn't that a big priority?
No, because that is what a man does for his family. That is the role of a man.
Yeah.
Okay. What you're talking about is a global initiative, which is part of basically the government replaces the man and the masculinity.
No,
okay?
I'm not advocating top down. I hate top down government control. I hate that. But I'm saying, isn't it a problem? And how do we fix it? I'm not advocating WHO, UN. I'm not advocating that. I don't trust them. I think they're evil. But it's just more of that virtue signaling again with these rich, white, overeducated men and women. So what I'm saying is it's still a fact that millions of babies are being killed in the womb. What do we do about that? It's a fact that children are dying of starvation. What do we do about that? Isn't it a big deal? Or do you think God's just welcoming them all into heaven? It doesn't really matter. These children are dying.
Okay, well, going back to reincarnation, when a
Okay.
child dies, depends how they died. If they're killed by abortion, it's kind of a different thing. But they die by starvation. It's kind of like that is the will of God. And the other thing is, a lot of these children that are dying of starvation are coming from areas. Number one, I have to get to the biology of the R versus K birth rate selection, which is in all species. It's on a spectrum. Okay, R selective groups basically have as many kids as possible and hope some of them survive and reproduce. The K selection, which is more like elephants, is there's a lot of energy that's dedicated to a small group, and so of children. And so calling an R group of children and a group of K group children, if you're giving equal things to the same one, the R's are going to reproduce way more. And this is what happened in South Africa. The black and white populations of South Africa was even in the 1960s. By the 1990s, it was like 80% black, 20% white. So blacks are on the R selection strata or evolutionary strategy, whereas whites are on the K selection. And so where was I going with this? So basically, when you're talking about like starvation of like African kids, it's basically.
I never mentioned Africa, by the way. I just said worldwide. I don't know where they're dying. Might be in Japan.
That's what everybody thinks of as Africa. That's where they're starving the most. I mean, and it's because they have the highest birth rates in the world. The parents just have sex nonstop, and they don't care what happens to the kids. And so basically, when you're swooping in as an outsider and interfering with that system, it's the same as basically interfering with a natural ecosystem. Okay, there's controls and there's stuff that happens that regulates that stuff, and when you're messing that up, it destroys the ecosystem and it gets out of control.
So do you honestly believe that God prefers white Europeans to dark-skinned African peoples?
No, because that implies God has a no, you can't say God.
What is it with the white, like what is it with the white people? Like, I mean, I'm as white as you get. And I mean, I feel superior because I feel superior to everyone no matter what, just because I'm me, right? I know that I'm not superior, but I feel superior. But I don't know if I were some other racial minority, I don't know if I would still have that feeling. Is it just my Scottish heritage that gives me that pride, and my Irish heritage, that Norseman's heritage that I have, that gives me that pride genetically? Or would I feel it? I'm sure there are lots of black people in Africa who feel very superior and feel very proud. But my point here is with the white thing, there seems to be a complex, like people have, I don't have it, but people have white guilt and stuff like that. So it seems like the whites are different. And dabbling with the alt-right and the, what I guess some would describe as extreme right-wing politics and stuff like that, I see a lot of chatter about the white race, the European race, and the Nordic peoples and stuff like that. And I can't deny that there seems to be something there. I can't quite put my finger on it, and I'm sort of hesitant to say, yeah, we're the like the chosen people, like the Jews. The Jews claim that they're the chosen people, and I agree, because that's what it says in my religion. They were the chosen people, and they promised the Messiah. The Messiah came, and then they missed the boat. Right? So it seems like in God's plan, it was the Jews, and then it was the Gentiles, and then, as it says in the book of Romans, chapter 11, once the full number come in, then the Jews, it'll be the time for the Jews to come in again. So I gave you a lot to think about there and talk about there, but just respond as you want, whatever points I hit.
Well, basically, you have to remember that the modern Jews are not the same Jews of ancient Israel. So they're not the chosen ones. The chosen one is basically all humans are chosen. That's the whole point of Jesus. You have the divine spark and the chosen part. The Jews in the Old Testament were basically, it was like a test run of, but the thing is, like, the Jews kept failing. They kept, going back to their sinful ways and whatnot. And so they lost their status, so to speak. But
Yeah, the
they
younger brother usurped the elder brother, as it happens so often in the Old Testament, right?
exactly. Um, and But yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of studying on the European groups, and it's like white is such a primitive term. There's like the Celtic peoples and the German peoples and stuff like that. And the thing is, what makes just those groups in general smarter, which is it's true for the most part on average. I'm not saying all are smarter or whatnot, but on average. And the reason
But the
it
Jews
is,
score highest, right? The Jews score highest on
well,
linguistic skill sets.
those studies don't have as large of a selective group, so it is a little skewed, and so they do make it for propaganda purposes. But yes, they are the Ashkenazi groups are very intelligent, and that's also because they're a European subgroup as well. So I'm not going to deny that. But going back into why that is, it has to do with war and cold weather. Those are the two main things of why that developed. It's because cold weather required you to actually be able to plan ahead for winter, and you have to have enough food to survive. You have to have a level of intelligence to do that. If you're living in the equator, in the tropics, where food is abundant and the weather is the same pretty much all year, you do not need as much of that intelligence to survive and reproduce. So it's evolutionary biology in humans, which a lot of Christians like to deny, but a lot of it makes perfect sense. The other thing is wars. The Germanic peoples were some of the most warlike peoples. They loved fighting. And it wasn't just the guys, it was the women too. And because of that, you have to be smart to fight. You just have to be. And I've grown an appreciation for MMA just because of that. But because of it's interesting because when World War II was going on, there was a Jewish author that wrote about the Germanic peoples and basically how Germany must be destroyed because the Germans, they keep starting wars ever since like the dawn of the Roman civilization. They just fight and fight and fight and fight and fight. In fact, a Roman emperor negotiated with Germans 3 times, and every single time they're like, we will not stop, we will keep rampaging. And he had a blood vessel blow and he died of a blood stroke. So I mean, that's a perfect example of basically this group and why they stand out, so to speak.
What about COVID? Because it ties in with the top-down tyrannical control of people who are godless virtue signalers and baby killers. And did you get the jab? And if you did, why did you get it? And if you didn't, why didn't you
Oh,
get
absolutely not. I didn't get the freaking jab. I'm fortunate it was easier in the States to get by without it than other countries. And, on my travels, I felt really bad for like the Australians and the Europeans that had to suffer the tyranny and the evil that they did. But, studying biology, I know that this thing is not what they inject is not a vaccine. It's mRNA code, which changes your DNA and changes what proteins your cell makes, which is pretty much manipulation on an disgusting level. So
gene therapy, they call it?
I mean, yeah, that's what they call it, and they give it a nice little ring. But I mean, it's literally like it changes your DNA. I mean, that's what mRNA does. It's the only thing that can go into the nucleus of a cell and basically change it. So, yeah, I think it's absolutely evil. And, all the mRNA technology that comes out after this, it's like, I think they're just experimenting on people. They want to see, number one, how much they can take with just pure blind will of just, I'm going to take this jab. And I think they didn't get as many people as they wanted because they fucked up with COVID when they released it. It wasn't as deadly as they thought it was going to be.
Do they exaggerate the numbers? Like here in Canada, they're saying about 80 to 90% took the jab, but I know in my circle I didn't take it, and none of my friends took it. Partly because I kind of lost a lot of friends that did take it, but just it's another divide and conquer tactic. Like it's just like there's the jab versus the unjab now. So just there's a lot of intolerance on both sides. Like I mean, I try to be try to love my enemies and all that sort of thing. But if you want me to starve to death if I don't take an experimental gene therapy, you're kind of my enemy, right?
Yes.
Especially if you're pro-abortion at the same time. It's like, that's okay, that's a bit too much for me. So, I do have friends that took the jab, but they're the people who said, I'm not going to take it. And then it's like, oh, shoot, I have to take it or I can't feed my family. So I do have sympathy for those people, right, who didn't want to take it, but they
Right.
want to feed their family. Come on. So is that free and informed consent when we don't know what the medium and long-term side effects are going to be?
Well, it's interesting you talk about consent because the elites and their evil ways require a level of consent because it relates to the karmic order. Alex Jones talked about this pretty well. He was basically like, the way they do this evil is there has to be a large level of consent within the populace to allow it to happen. And so a lot of times when you have like subliminal programming or stuff in media, like actively telling you, something's going to happen, like there's plenty of stuff predicting 9/11 was going to happen. There's also a lot of stuff like Stanley Kubrick did a lot of predictive stuff in his films, like talking about the fluoride in the water, as well as Eyes Wide Shut, which was talking about the satanic sex orgies and pedophilia. So, but the thing is, basically, they have to, you will see it a lot in like the media and these places. They'll tell you what's going on. And like, so people will have this information and they will consent. And if they consent and allow it, they are part of the sin.
It's the old legend or myth or whatever you want to call it about the vampire. He can't actually come into your home unless you invite him in, or that sort of myth. And it's the same thing with God and Satan. Like, Satan gets permission for every single thing that he does.
Yes.
And you read about this in the book of Job, for example. And it's all very juridical, and things are set up in such a way that we have absolutely no excuse when we stand before God in the judgment day. We'll have no excuse because all of the facts are there. And Satan's taking note of all the ways that we consented. And Satan will say faithfully to God, I told him this is what I was going to do, and he knew it, and he consented, and that's why I've got him. His soul is mine. So this is the way God works with Satan. He allows Satan to try to grab our souls, and a lot of people say yes. And to say yes, and to merit hell for saying yes, you have to give informed consent, right? You have to know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you do not merit hell. Sorry. So you have to know what you're doing to go to hell. Same thing with going to heaven. You have to know and love and serve God. It's just, there's no other way that this can possibly happen. So that's why we have no excuse. And it's a very, very, very scary prospect. Like, we have to think very carefully about what the mainstream media is telling us. And we have to think very carefully about what our religious leaders are telling us. And, we can't trust anyone but God, really. Right?
Yes, I mean the basis of that free will and is the mark of the beast. Basically, I mean the mark of the beast is the perfect passage about it. It's like you cannot engage in society unless you have the mark of the beast. You cannot buy or sell goods and stuff like that. And so all this vaccine passport, QR code, social credit score is the precursor to the mark of the beast system, which is why is one of the points of evidence I point that we are living in the end times. But the other thing is these people that did take it, but they had the choice not to. You always have a choice not to do it. You always do. And the thing is, you might have lost your job. You might have to live very uncomfortably. But if you're a very intelligent person, you can figure out something to do. But the thing is, you made a choice where it's like, I'm going to inject this experimental stuff into me that doesn't know what it's going to do in order to keep my comfort and my security. And, it's kind of, that's the test with governments that are testing the population of what they can tolerate before they enforce more stricter and communistic doctrines.
Well, yeah, we've been softened and effeminized by pornography and sexual license. I think that's the main attack. And the Freemasons talk about that very openly. That's how they're going to destroy the church. And it's, of course, never going to be destroyed perfectly, but it can be corrupted and, that individual members can certainly lose their faith and stuff like that and lose their souls. So the attack on the family through sexuality is one of the most successful routes, I think, that Satan and his minions have at their disposal. And you just see the softening. And my wife was watching some Russian military training videos, and she's like, wow, these are real men. And, they're full of testosterone, and they're masculine and they're manly. And if we look at Canada or America, it seems like there's a lot of softness. I'm not the most testosterone filled guy, but I can even notice in the Canadian military and the US military that's creeping in a little bit of softness, and I think it has to do with sexuality. Am I wrong?
It's a combination of many things, actually. Masculinity has been under assault since the end of World War II, for the most part. Fluoride in the water is the big fucking thing, because that dims your spiritual connection with the spirit realm, basically. The other thing is soy, cooking oils, plastics.
Okay. Estrogen.
No,
estrogen.
Yeah, all of that is estrogen.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the concept of a soy boy is literally the estrogen filled faces and like maldeveloped beard and facial hair and all that. And so that's all calculated. I mean, like the same chemicals that Alex Jones was talking about that turned the frogs gay, we consume as well. I mean, it's in the water. It's just the frogs were way more sensitive to it because they're aquatic beings. Whereas us, we drink bottled water. And I actually lived abroad, and I want to actually move abroad permanently before the end of the year because of how bad it is in America and Western countries. And I'm seeing a lot of people moving abroad for lower standard of living or lower cost of living and just better quality of life, as well as nature. The nature's better and way more spiritual energy. But going back to masculinity, of course, pornography and sexuality degeneration is the first thing to target when you're trying to destroy a society, because that's all basically man's greatest energy comes from his sexual energy. So, I was talking about that a lot. And so what that does is, and you can study it with like going to the most sexually repressive societies actually have some of the highest works of culture compared to open ones, which are more end up degenerating and collapsing. Yeah. But I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I mean, that's why marriage is always a thing in every single group of people in the world. There's no little communist groups, everybody just loves each other. It's because basically it's an arrangement between the men and the women, or men of a society. It's the men, actually. It's basically, okay, you be a productive member of society, okay, and we'll give you guaranteed sex, okay? That is how it works. Otherwise, if you go to the basic alpha 20%, 80% beta rule, there's going to be a large majority of betas in the society that are very upset and ended up revolting and killing the alphas. But the thing is, that's happening right now, but that revolt stage is not happening because all the testosterone is being destroyed and is being converted into pornography and all of these other methods. So, for example, when Israel was conquering Palestine and like they were taking over the airwaves, they just screamed pornography on all of the Palestinian TVs. Oh, wow. It's the number one demoralization tactic.
Disgusting.
Yes.
So, can you give us a hint of where you'd like to move, or is that top secret?
I'm thinking either Asia or Latin America. I'm leaning towards Latin America, though, because I do speak Spanish.
Oh, yeah. Oh, nice.
And, Latins are, I did ayahuasca in Latin America.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
And it's like they've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years. And it's kind of like they respect nature. They respect the plants that they ingest and what they consume. They are part of the nature. They are not the consumer like what is in the West, which is the unnatural thing. Like I was actually at a party last night, and basically at this party there was a big bonfire. And I hated the fire because the wood they were using was so fake. It was like it
Oh.
didn't feel like, real, or like had a good energy to it. And whereas the fires we burned in like the Amazon rainforest, you could detect like the good energy when you're burning it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when you were talking earlier about, you need to be more intelligent in the colder climes and these sorts of things. I thought immediately about the Amazon because my wife and I just watched a little documentary series on National Geographic about Primal Survivor. The guy went through the Amazon as a survivalist, and he's a pretty cool guy. I think there's a lot of editing involved and a lot of movie magic in this show to make things go just so. But nonetheless, he has a lot of skills. He's a South American origin, this guy. But my point is that the most sophisticated skill to have is to respect the environment, nature, and I'm not talking about the lefty, climate change nonsense. I'm talking about actually knowing how to be a custodian of this beautiful earth that we were given. And it's a very sophisticated art slash science, right? And the people that are in touch with how to eat and how to have sustainability, even though that word is totally disgusting because it's in the mouth of the libtards all the time, but to actually be in touch with nature and to work with nature and to have a natural family, and for men to be men, women to be women, and children to be children. Imagine that. So I think that is the most sophisticated and godly way to live, is to actually be in touch with reality and not to live in a fantasy world with all your PhDs and your ivory tower top-down policies. And this brings me to my next question, which is about the global elites, whoever they may be. We hear a lot about Bill Gates and Soros and all these people, but I can't imagine that we actually know the names of the people running this fallen world. The one name I do know is Satan. He's the big guy at the top. He's the prince of this world. But what is in it for someone to? What do they really get out of all the sex orgies? And if they drink the blood of tortured children, is it really worth it? Are they really getting a lasting pleasure? Do they wake up in the morning and say, "Yeah, I'm going to do more of that tonight with a different child or with a different whore or whatever?" Is it satisfying? Are they really getting off on the power of manipulating society from the top down? If that's what they're doing. I don't know if that's what they're doing, but a lot of conspiracy theorists seem to think it's like a bunch of Jews running the world and they're having sex orgies and whatever. Is it really that fun compared to just having a nice, simple, wholesome life? And like you were saying, appreciating good vibes with being in touch with nature and all these sorts of things. What do you think, what allows these people to get up in the morning and to be excited? Because it seems like they're working hard for the demise of Western culture, no?
So basically, I just want to say also Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were Jewish, and Ghislaine Maxwell's father was an Israeli spy. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. Is she going to spill the beans or no?
Doesn't matter. The point is it's waking people up, but those facts about them need to be said. They're being conveniently swept under. But the in regards to that, the best movie about that is honestly Eyes Wide Shut.
Love it.
And it basically, the way that works is, of course, they're not going to get any. It's like it's the same thing if you binge like fucking heroin or methamphetamines. Like, you just you get addicted and you try and get these sensational highs. The other thing is when they do like these sacrifices, they get powers, like negative black magic powers. Black magic absolutely exists. And they can do superhuman things, but there is always a price. And, so that's a lot of it. It's like, so yeah, they get like, their senses stimulated and they get these powers and stuff like that. And then a lot of them get off on the power they have over other people. There's a lot of, psychological disorders that feed these kind of behaviors.
Yeah, but when you talked about the African or the person that lives on the equator just kind of being lazy because they can reach out and grab a coconut and a banana and just like have sex and go swimming, whatever. It sounds like a pretty good lifestyle. Like I'd kind of like to live that lifestyle, but I can't because I'm Christian. But the people that run the world, they don't have that lazy approach to just like low-hanging fruit and just get the pleasure and whatever. They seem like they're really working hard to have a systematic like conveyor belt of like we have to enslave everyone in order for us to get off with these cheap and tawdry pleasures, right? Am I wrong? Or that's what it seems like. They're really working hard and they're cooperating together. And Jesus talks about this. He says, if Satan stands against Satan, his house cannot stand. So it seems like they have to work together, but it seems like a lot of work. Wouldn't you rather just sort of kick back in the Caribbean and just chill?
Well, it's a classic example of how a power vacuum works and how a power hierarchy is established and whatnot. There's always going to be hierarchies. The destruction of hierarchies is pure communist, and it's just not possible. So these hierarchies that are built, a lot of them too, are divided into these clubs where it's like sometimes you have to be in the club a while before you get the effects, and so it's like. Or like these
there's
powers.
There's the promise that keeps people climbing the ladder before they even get to the exciting stuff, you mean?
Exactly. I mean, like, so like they're tempted with like this knowledge, like in the Mason, like I was talking about the Masons, like the lower level ones, they're like, oh, I don't believe in God, but these are some cool guys I could have a beer with, and then like, over time they give that energy, and then, as they get higher and higher up, that's when, they get stuck, just like the debt system. You get stuck, and it becomes a lot harder to unplug yourself. And so that's when it might not seem appealing coming from the outside, but if you have a sunk cost into that, it adds to the commitment. And so basically there's always going to be these power structures or these clubs around the world that are inherently evil. In fact, I was watching a Orthodox monk, or like a movie about an Orthodox monk in Greece who was like, he was basically exiled by the patriarch of Alexandria, and like everybody, like he was slandered and all of this stuff. Because so basically, like even power in the church gets corrupted at the highest levels. And so power has, the saying, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's one of the most important things. So because power is about control, and if you don't maintain it very like arduously, it falls apart. And so in order to be on top, you have to have an arduous component that is hardworking and diligent and whatnot.
Scary, scary stuff. So we gotta, I mean, for me, the whole point of, the main weapon we have, I would say, is education. Let's get our children educated. Let's start with the basics. What's a man? What's a woman? Okay, we can start with that. I think that's not too complicated, right? And who is our creator, and what is he like, and what does he want from us, and these sorts of things. I think a good Christian education would solve a lot of problems, right? But just to wrap up, because I do have to go now, but to wrap up, I'd like to leave it on a sort of positive note. If you have any sort of vision of the future that's positive, and I know you do because you're a Christian, maybe you could just paint a little picture and talk about what your vision is for humanity, or even just for yourself as an individual.
Well, I mean, when the third dimension is destroyed, after there's no more free will, the good will ascend. The good will always win. The logos of the world is always, it's if you follow it in a good way, you're going to be with good people. And the law of attraction goes with that as well. And basically, yeah, it's kind of like Christ when he was talking about like stocking up on stuff and having anxiety for the future. It's like, you got to live in the now. You got to really just dedicate your energy for now. Don't dedicate it too much. I mean, you do for the future to a certain extent, but you don't worry about things you can't change. And same thing with the past. So those are my main things in terms of spirituality. And I'm confident a lot of people are waking up to this evil that's going on right now, even if it might not be enough right now. It's going to get better, and just don't have fear. The main thing is don't have fear. I killed all my fear and anxiety, and it's the greatest thing, and nothing holds me back.
Nice. Very nice to meet you. I appreciate you taking the time to come on, and hopefully you'll come back sometime and chat some more. And you got a lot of interesting ideas, and seem like a nice guy. So take care of yourself. And if you do end up moving, just get in touch with me on Telegram and let me know the exciting news. It sounds pretty cool, your plan there.
Thanks, David.
So
I
say
enjoyed
hi.
chatting.
Yeah, say hi anytime, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
All right, sounds
God bless.
good. Have a good one.
Bye.